I think we can all agree Cave Story's two main characters, Quote and Curly, are some of the coolest characters in any video game. We have the cool, silent type who's the jack of all trades with seemingly any kind of weapon in the form of Quote, and then we have Curly Brace, the voice to Quote's silence who will fight with him until the very end, even if it costs losing a memory or two. These two played incredibly cool roles in their own game, but what about games outside of Cave Story? Sure, they live happily ever after once you complete the game on the true ending, but does this dynamic duo ever confront any other dangers? Well, yes. Quote and Curly have each made a handful of cameos in other games, a webcomic, and even a TV show. While none of the cameos in this video are canonical, I still think it'll be fun to look over what the two cave-dwelling robots like to do in their non-canonical spare time. Of course, I'd always like to start by saying all the information in this video has been well documented on the Cave Story wiki as well as the Cave Story tribute site. If you'd like to discover more info on this game, you could always browse these wonderful sites in your spare time. Or you could always wait for me to make more videos on different topics in the future. Your choice. Another note I should say is that some of the gameplay or screenshots in this video aren't mine, due to me not owning some of the games. All sources for the footage I do not own will be in the description below. Now finally getting into the cameos, believe it or not, Quote and Curly only shared 3 guest appearances together. 2 officially from Nicalis. Funnily enough, these are also all playable guest appearances. The first is through Nicalis' very own crossover puzzle versus game, Crystal Crisis. Quote and Curly are both able to fling giant blocks at each other until one of them eventually dies. Ah yes, the cartoony blocky battlefield also known as preschool in video game form. Being serious, I actually do love playing Crystal Crisis and thought this game could have been something more, but what we have isn't bad at all. If the game ever does go on sale, please consider buying. Next, we have a fan game cameo from the game Game Garrison 2, a playable 2D remake of Team Fortress 2. Quote and Curly are both hidden classes in the game. They both use the same weapons, those being the bubbling and the blade. Some might think it's weird that the duo used the bubbling instead of their signature spur and machine gun, but I think it's neat that the hidden characters use one of Cave Story's hidden weapons. Game Garrison 2 is entirely free by the way, so for those wanting to check it out without having to break the bank. Their final shared cameo is actually my favorite in this entire video. Quote and Curly both share playable appearances in Studio Seisensen's Blade Strangers. For those familiar with my content, you know that Blade Strangers is currently my favorite game of all time. Yes, 100% due to Quote and Curly's playability. This game did massively underperform, which does sadden me to this day, as the dream of me being able to take an Anime-Evo trophy for Blade Strangers seems to have died with this game's momentum. But fear not, fellow robot fans, as the Blade Strangers Discord is still active to this very day. Sadly, they have stopped their bi-weekly tournaments, but the players on the Discord are more than happy to get you into indie Street Fighter. There's so many neat details in their cameo for this game, it'd take an entire video alone just to cover their movesets and story modes. In fact, I have a video coming up in the near future going into intense detail on their Blade Strangers cameo. There should be a card here if you just so happen to be watching this video in the near future. Now, getting into their individual cameos, we'll start with Quote. Quote honestly has some of the more interesting cameos of the two. One I'm amazed was discovered to this day. Quote's first individual cameo is a DLC in Runner 2. Runner is, well, a non-stop running game where you must react to the level as your character runs through it. Honestly, I think the trailer for Quote's DLC is the best part about this cameo. The entire trailer is how Quote got sucked into the world of Runner 2, and it's all narrated by the main man himself, Charles Martinet. Yes, Super Mario himself introduced Quote into a game. Actually, funny enough, Charles Martinet is in the game as well. Not Mario or any of the characters he's voiced, no, the actual Charles Martinet is playable. Wild. Also, while still holding on to the topic of games, Quote is referenced, but not in the game Terraria. The robot hat item will change the player's hairstyle, and it holds a striking resemblance to Quote's hat, being red with the white front and giving the player Quote's infamous green antenna. This item is also pretty dang rare. It has a 1 in 250 chance of dropping from piranhas and anglers. This is believed to be a reference for the Iron Head boss in Cave Story, but no confirmation sadly. While a little bit off topic, there is another reference to a game involving the same Ironhead fight. For those who don't know, if you can beat the entire fight on full health, you get to see Ika-chan, the main character of another game Pixel made before Cave Story. Straying away from games, we have what is possibly my favorite quote solo cameo, and possibly my favorite reference to Cave Story ever. In the TV show The Sweet Life on Deck, specifically the episode Going Bananas, Zack can be seen playing a Second Life MMO where he's in an arcade, and in the background we could see a clear shot of Quote in the first cave in one of the arcade cabinets. The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and The Sweet Life on Deck are pretty nostalgic for me, as I always watched those shows as a kid, so this cameo means a ton to me. This cameo does happen fairly quick, and there is no real reference from the characters in the show to the game, but this is enough for me. This is one of the only recorded times that Cave Story is ever seen on television via reference. Whoever snuck this into the show, I salute you. While she doesn't have as many cameos, Curly Brace does seem to be a lot more favored in the video game universe, and is referenced a lot more, rather than hitting the TV and webcomic scene like Quote. As I mentioned before, Curly is playable in Game Garrison 2 and Blade Strangers, but she also has a playable appearance in 1001 Spikes. To unlock her, you must obtain all of the game's 30 golden skulls. And while playing as her, you get to hear a remix of Mischievous Robot, or the theme that's playing when you're first going through Egg Corridor. Curly also makes a playable guest appearance in Umihara Kawase Fresh, as the game's third playable character. Curly was actually patched into the game on July 9th, 2019, which is when the game made its international release for everyone to enjoy, although this cameo does require for you to beat the game's 12th quest at least. Next up is actually a reference to Curly rather than Curly herself. It's quick and short, but during the Powers tutorial of Kid Icarus Uprising, Palutena will tell Pit,
"Remember, Pit, you won't be fighting alone out there.
You're going to send me a machine gun robot girlfriend?
No, I'll be guiding you on your journey."
Cute, simple references. Finally, Curly's last cameo for this video is hidden. It's an optional boss fight in I Wanna Kill the Guy. This boss fight is honestly my favorite cameo for her. This fight itself isn't even a real fight. It's a dance competition between you and Curly in which you have to copy her moves to the beat when she does them. Of course, this being I Wanna Kill the Guy, the inputs are lightning quick and expected to be pressed near perfectly. This boss fight is incredibly funny, but I do gotta give a warning for those playing it, as there is a strobe light effect going on throughout it. You can't dance without some really bright, colorful lights. And that marks most of the duo's cameos in games that don't rhyme with stave, Corey. There are a few more references to Cave Story as a whole in other games, like Balrog being a statue in Castle Into the Darkness, but this is a video just for Curly and Quote. The two have done plenty together as well as separate, and as I mentioned before, I'll be making a video highlighting Quote and Curly in Blade Strangers, as their movesets really are a treat to Cave Story fans. As for this video, thanks so much for watching. If you want to keep updated with more mini Cave Story video essays, please subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Nerdieo is out.